I would like to do some housekeeping before I start the webinar. So I would just like to mention that there's interpreting. So you can choose your language at the bottom of your screen. So click on the little globe and choose the language that you need. So para escoger su idioma, hacer clic abajo de su pantalla en el icono del pequeño globo terráqueo. Y si hay algún problema, por favor, nos avisan en el chat box, en la discussion. Merci de choisir votre langue d'interprétation en cliquant en bas de votre écran. Et au cas de problème, s'il vous plaît, signalez-le dans le chat box. So if there are any issues with the channels, please call our attention to that in the chat box. So now that everyone should be on their languages, another important element for the webinar to go smoothly, so please turn off your microphones, put them on mute to avoid background noise. That will help a lot in the interpretation and in the sound, the quality of the sound and the presentation. But we do want to hear from you during the questions and answers. So if you have a question during the presentation, please drop it on the chat box, and we'll pick it up later in the session. And also, if you want, during the questions and answer session, you can raise your hand with the little button in the Zoom menu below. Also, please be aware that we are recording this session. So if you don't wish to be recorded, you can turn off your camera. We prefer to see you, obviously, but if you prefer not to be seen on the recording, you can do so by turning off your camera. So having said that, I think we can start. So good day to all, and a general salutation to Vincentian family members, but also to people who collaborate with Vincentian family members in different parts of the world. We're very happy to welcome you today to today's webinar on human trafficking and homelessness, hosted by the FAMBIN Homeless Alliance, which is a Vincentian family initiative to end homelessness. My name is Natalie Montesa, and I coordinate the 13 Houses campaign of the FAMBIN Homeless Alliance. So just a few words to introduce the webinar. One of the objectives of the FAMBIN Homeless Alliance this year was to put the spotlight on refugee people, displaced populations, and people experiencing human trafficking. We held a conference in Seville earlier this year, and you can find more information on that conference if you want to know more on our website. But as an outcome of that conference, we felt there was an interest by many participants to know more about what can be done regarding the trafficking of persons, a field in which many Vincentian family members are involved in. So I will also want to mention that we scheduled this meeting today to mark a bit ahead of schedule the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, because the trafficking of persons is a manifestation of that violence towards women, even though women are not the only victims of this problem. So this is what this webinar is about, complementing the information shared in Seville, and exploring also how to go even further, and together how to work to do something about it. We will do that thanks to the precious collaboration of Sister Winifred Doherty, to whom we are very grateful to be joining us from the United States on this Thanksgiving Day. She will be spurring the discussion with a presentation as the first part of this webinar, and then we will have about 20 to 25 minutes to discuss with her in our in our friend Jim Claffey, who is the representative of the Congregation of the Mission at the UN, will be moderating our discussion with Sister Winifred. Jim, who's also in the United States. So again, thank you for kindly accepting to be with us during your holiday. So the floor is yours, Jim. You can tell us a bit about Sister Winifred.
I'm happy to do that. It's my pleasure to present Sister Winifred Doherty as our presenter today. She is a member of the Congregation of Our Lady of Charity of the Good Shepherd. Good Shepherd mission partners have a presence in 72 countries, working with women and girls who are oppressed by abject poverty, often homeless, vulnerable to all forms of gender-based violence, including trafficking, forced migration, and neglect of the girl child. They combine service provision with advocacy for structural and systemic change. Winifred is a social worker by profession, graduating from University College, Cork, Ireland. Winifred has worked in Ethiopia, Africa, for 16 years as a community development worker and director of services. Winifred was appointed as main representative for Good Shepherd Mission Partners to the United Nations in New York in 2008 and continues in that position. Now, I'm just going to say that's a very brief resume for someone who has accomplished so much. 14 years at the UN. I mean, that alone would bear a whole other paragraph of her accomplishments. So it speaks to her humility. I also checked around with a couple of our colleagues at the UN, and they tell me that Winifred is as a friend is great company, a great listener, and a great raconteur. So I would like to say in conclusion, before I turn the microphone over, this is a very heavy topic, trafficking in persons and homelessness, but at least in Winifred's presentation, we'll be thrilled with an interesting and lovely Irish accent. So Sister Winifred, the floor is yours.
Very much, Jim, and happy Thanksgiving to you and indeed to all of our colleagues on the call this morning, because we give thanks for all of your mission work, your contribution and your service to people who are homeless. And while it is Thanksgiving morning, I was very happy to accept this invitation because your founder, St. Vincent de Paul, and St. John Eudes were contemporaries. St. John Eudes was at the same time, and he founded the Congregation of Our Lady of Charity of the Good Shepherd. So thank you very much to everybody for this invitation. And I will share screen now. And as Jim said, it is a heavy topic, but also it is a topic and it is an issue that we are all engaged in terms of trying to address. And so because of that, we feel in our hearts the pain of the people, but also we're doing something about it. So I'm going to begin with something from Pope Francis, which he said on the sorry, now I'm just, okay, which he said on the 8th of February this year. And he said, the suffering caused by human trafficking is an open wound on the body of Christ. Human trafficking is violence. And as Anna said, or Natalie said when we started, today is the first day of the 16 days of campaign to end violence against women and girls. And that's why I wear orange for these 6 days as a mark of solidarity with everybody who is experiencing violence. The violence suffered by every woman and every girl is an open wound on the body of Christ and on the body of all humanity. We are all impacted. It is a deep wound that affects every one of us too, the Pope said. And I will add, every boy and man that is trafficked is equally a wound on the body of Christ. And so to set the scene, we have a global international convention to help us with our work. And it's known as the Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. And it is supplemented by 3 protocols, one of which is very important to us: the protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children. And if anybody is from Italy, it's sometimes known, even globally, as the Palermo Protocol, because it was signed in Palermo. And to date, 178 out of the 193 member states of the United Nations have ratified this convention and protocol. And there are 2 other protocols. One is against smuggling of migrants. And you and I know that oftentimes smuggling is the first stage in being trafficked. The people willingly put themselves and pay money for smugglers to get them to a country. And then traffickers are there ready to receive them. And then there's also another protocol against the illicit manufacturing and trafficking in firearms. But as I say, it's the first one, the Palermo Protocol, that we are primarily interested in. And so what do we mean when we talk about trafficking? And for trafficking to happen, 3 things have to be happening at the same time: an act, a means, and a purpose. And so we find the act, the means, and the purpose in the definition from the UN Protocol to Prevent, Suppress, and Punish Trafficking in Persons, from the Palermo Protocol. And it says, trafficking in persons shall mean the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, receipt of persons. So that's the act. Any one or combination of these is the act. By means of threat, the use of force or other forms of coercion, of abduction, of fraud, of deception, of abuse of power, or of a position of vulnerability, or for the giving and receiving of payment or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over another person for the purpose of exploitation. So it's quite a long sentence. Just think of the act, the means, and the purpose. And the purpose, exploitation. And so some of what I'm going to share with you this morning comes from the 5th global report, which was done in 2020. And actually the new report, because it's done every 2 years, is due probably at the beginning of next year. And so it's the report on trafficking in persons. And this report lays out a graphic like this for us in 6 chapters. And the titles of the chapters are hugely informative without going anywhere else. Trafficking, it's global, and you and I know that. Secondly, socio-economic factors and the risk of COVID-19 recession. They were identifying these as the causes. Chapter 3 for me was very alarming. Children are easy to target. Number 4, trafficking for forced labor and the economy. So somewhere we're all complicit, because we all live in the global community, and we all use the production. We consume what is produced. And it says, number 5, traffickers' use of the internet, and they termed it digital hunting fields. Now that too is alarming, to think that the internet is a digital hunting field for vulnerable people. And chapter 6 then is a regional overview. So if you want to look at any particular region in the country, or the country within that region, you have access to the material there. And the PowerPoint will be shared and the links are live, so you can explore for yourself. So human trafficking is found in every country and every region, and it remains a hidden crime. Human trafficking is always a crime, but it's hidden, with perpetrators operating in the dark corners of the internet and the underbelly of the global economy, to entrap victims for sexual exploitation, for forced labor, domestic servitude, and other forms of exploitation. And I add that perpetrators mix with vulnerable peoples, including homeless populations, to exploit the situation with fraudulent and deceptive proposals and offers. And I think my most recent up-to-date experience of this has been the war in Ukraine. And when the Ukrainians started moving into the other European countries, the reports of traffickers who were posing with all kinds of offers to these very vulnerable people. And the report from Russia that white women for sexual exploitation are very acceptable, and therefore there were 2 a dollar. But of course, the women who were being trapped did not know what they were being trapped into. They thought they were going to be offered work and home and another way of living. They never expected to be trafficked into sexual exploitation and into the brothels in Russia. And so who is trafficked? Well, men, women, boys and girls. And you see some of the percentages there. The higher percentage is 46% women. And between children, the girls are 19% more vulnerable to being trafficked than boys. But everybody is vulnerable. And victims are trafficked when they're more vulnerable. That's exactly what I've said. And these vulnerabilities can be expressed as economic need, emotional attachment to traffickers. Particularly happens for vulnerable women and vulnerable children. Immigration status, limited education or knowledge of a foreign language, children with a dysfunctional family. And that happens a lot in the United States, where children who run away from home are really and truly targets of people who are engaged in trafficking. Mental behavior or neurological disorders, children deprived of parental care, and people with physical disabilities. And I will add to that list also the community of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. All of that community are equally vulnerable. And I note here, homelessness is not listed, But if you stop and think, these pre-existing factors are the very same ones that lead to homelessness. So congratulations to you for making the connection, for connecting the dots. And there's a very important report that comes out every year from the United States State Department, the Trafficking in Persons report. And I highlight it here because it's always interesting to read from the various countries' perspective. It's online and it's free. If you put your name in and say you want a copy of it, you can get a copy of it. But I like it both for the introduction, where it talks about the newer aspects that are arising, and I like it for how it looks at the country. And it looks, it gives you the rating for your country. Now, trafficking in persons and human trafficking and modern slavery, we hear these words brought up, and they're kind of umbrella terms, and they're often used interchangeably to refer to a crime whereby traffickers exploit and profit at the expense of adults or children by compelling them to perform labor or engage in commercial sex. When a person younger than 18 years of age is used to perform a commercial sex act, it is a crime. It is a crime whether it's a commercial sex act or not, it's a crime, regardless of whether there is force, fraud, or coercion. And I think we're very clear on that, that any act towards a child is a crime. Two main types of human trafficking: trafficking into labor and trafficking into commercial sexual exploitation and prostitution. Now, I add on prostitution from the perspective of my congregation, because we are very focused on girls and women. And indeed, it was St. John Eudes in the confessional who heard so much about how women were being prostituted in his day, who tried to do something about it. So we have a long history, both the Vincentian family and Good Shepherds, in addressing poverty and this issue of prostitution. And I try to be very particular about words I use. So I never use sex work, except to quote it, because sex work seems to imply that it's a form of labor, a form of work, and it's not. It's violence against women. It's systemic and it's organized violence against women. So I'm just making that distinction there. You may have some questions about that when we come to the questions and answers. I'm not going to delay on this particular slide, distinguishing certain forms of human trafficking. I think we have already mentioned all of them. This graphic here sums it up again: domestic servitude into, and here the term is used, sex trafficking. I prefer trafficking into commercial sexual exploitation, forced labor, bonded labor, child labor. And we have a ministry in the Democratic Republic of Congo that is totally taken up with trying to eradicate child labor in the mines. And the forms of exploitation among detected victims of trafficking. And ones that maybe we haven't mentioned are forced marriage, baby selling, the removal of organs. I was just recently engaged with one of our sisters in Madagascar who was talking about the removal of eyes from people with albinism because of there's witchcraft associated with it, but people want these eyes. And so they gouge them out and leave the people blind if they have albinism. And then these eyes are trafficked, sold on the market for money. And so the newer form of it that is confronting us all is this internet-based trafficking. And I've already said to you about the internet being a digital hunting field. Technology is used not only for sexual exploitation, but also to coerce victims into crime and forced labor, and to advertise the selling of kidneys harvested from victims that have been trafficked. And even in my days in Ethiopia, among the street children, I encountered children who were being offered money to go to Israel to sell their kidney, or to give their lung or whatever. They had no idea of the consequences that were going to happen to them. And many of them never returned to the street. Again, the digital hunting fields, where they describe traffickers as actively hunting those whom they deem as vulnerable to falling victims of trafficking, or passively fishing for potential victims by posting advertisements and waiting for potential victims to respond. Traffickers are advertising deceptive job offers, marketing exploitative services to potential paying customers while recruiting victims. Patterns of exploitation have been transformed by digital platforms, as webcams and live streams have created new forms of exploitation and reduced the need for transportation and transfer of victims. And much of this newer aspect I'm talking about is a consequence of the shutdown and the lockdowns during the COVID years. If you're interested, and I'm keeping my eye on the time, and so as to make sure there's plenty of time for you to interact with each other and ask questions, I'm going to maybe go quickly and we'll finish in less than 5 minutes. The Polaris project is in the USA. It's a very good link to look at and to keep your eye on. And the new estimates of human trafficking in the world, they say, are shocking but not surprising. 28 million people worldwide are reckoned to be trafficked, and this usually is a conservative estimate, with a rise of 12% between 2016 and 2021. Now, the signs of human trafficking, the Polaris project say it's not knowing the signs, it's knowing the story. So in my early days, we were being said, oh, watch for the signs of human trafficking. But the narrative has moved to saying, know the story. Chances are there's going to be nothing visible, nothing that you can see across the room or even from close up that would alert you that a stranger is being trafficked. And this may come as a surprise. We might be looking for the signs or indicators of trafficking, such as a person looking disheveled or upset or scared. But as we learn more about how trafficking really works, we are also learning that the best way to help is to pay attention to people you actually know or interact with, your students, your tenants, your children, your patients, your co-workers. It's all about two magic words: context and proximity. And I used to say, trafficking happens in your back garden. It's that close to us. But the line now is, it's not about the signs, it's knowing the story. And I have mentioned to you, and you're probably very aware of the nexus between human trafficking and homelessness. And when somebody becomes homeless, then they are very vulnerable to being trafficked, particularly if they're single people, particularly if they're young women, particularly if they are young women with children. I think we're aware of all of the issues that arise in terms of poverty and discrimination, etc. And I want to maybe end with the root causes. And the root causes can be summed up in 5 Ps. I like this first one because I had to look up the meaning of the word, but I've been using it for a while. Plenonyxia, which is extreme greed and avarice. Privilege, pleasure, the whole aspect of sexual exploitation is all to do with pleasure, power, and profit. And sometimes people get pleasure from inflicting pain on people. I just want to go back to that pleasure one, because it's not all pleasure in nice. It's pleasure in seeing people suffer and inflicting pain on them. And as I said, we're all complicit in the global economy, which is focused on profit. And so it's all to do with systems and structures. And today, it's not just people that are threatened. The very planet is threatened by these same 5 Ps. And so I am very much advocating for economies of care, of gender justice, eco-justice, and social justice, including social housing. And most of all, social housing for a group like you. And I put my advocacy work specifically into the whole advocating for social protection floors. So that's the side that I go on in terms of eliminating and eradicating poverty. So I'm going to stop there. The other slides that are there, you can look at them yourselves. You know, it's a repeat, it's putting things in other words, but so that we have conversation. So thank you very much for engaging, and I'll stop the sharing now, and I'll hand over to Jim and Natalie, and thank you again.
Sister Winifred, thank you so much. So everyone, we have an opportunity to engage with Sister with our questions. Sister Winifred, maybe I'll start off with one, if you would. Social protection floors is something we speak a lot about at the UN, but it may not be a commonly understood term. Could you say a few more words about social protection floors for our participants here today?
I'd be very happy, Jim. I thought you were going to ask me a hard question. So,
oh, there's one coming. Go ahead.
Social protection floors was a term that came up in the United Nations when I went there first in 2010. And the more I explored it, the more I realized that this has huge potential for the people you and I deal with, who are largely without income, homeless, poor, whatever. So basically in 2012, the ILO organization, the International Labour Organization, it's tripartite. So it's the government, it's the employers, and it's the unions. And there had been an old convention, almost as old as the International Labour Organization, around social security. And many of you may be aware of social security. But this wanted to extend social security to people who did not have social security. And so they talked about putting in a floor, not a ceiling, a floor, on which everybody would stand. And the floor, there were 5 points in the floor: universal health care, maternity care, and child benefits. The whole issue of unemployment for everybody, anybody. Anybody that was unemployed because of disability, because they couldn't find work. And I said 4, I said 5, there's only 4. And the 4th one is pensions for older people. So the idea was to take a care of people throughout the life cycle, from birth right through to older age. And so the idea was the floor would be a minimum that was needed for people to live on. It would not be means tested. There was no hoops to be jumped through. It was going to be provided as a way of bringing up everybody to be able to live in dignity.
Thank you so much.
Of course, social services are part of that, and social housing is part of it. Yes.
Thank you, Sister. So let's open it up to any questions. That if you raise your hand, we'll call on you. And Sister Winifred had graciously agreed to try to answer any question we might pose.
And if you're wondering what question to ask, you may be sure somebody else is wondering as well. No question is too simple, and no question is ever foolish. So, and I guess that always somebody is happy. Oh, that was asked. I was afraid to ask it. So, you know, jump in.
Sister Winifred, thank you very much for sharing your expertise. My question is about, obviously, some people live in countries and in contexts where there are structures. When you're faced with a situation of human trafficking, you know exactly to what institution or to what forces you're supposed to refer the person or indicate the issue. Would that be some office of social care or somewhere else? But there are countries like mine in Haiti where things are so unstructured, the state is so weak, that when you face, like you said, the importance of context and proximity, that when you get to know the story of a person faced in a situation of human trafficking, you don't have specific institution who can take over that case and get this person out of the situation. So when in some developing countries, you're faced with an individual person that you get to know in some way, and you find yourself with an issue that's beyond your ability to help, and there's no definite structure to help this person, what can be done? I know it's very difficult to answer without a specific context, but I think it's a situation where many intentions can find themselves where they would like to help, but they don't have the means or the structures to help this person.
Thank you very much, Yasmin. And yes, indeed, you are correct. And yes, indeed, it is a huge problem. And the latter part of the PowerPoint that I didn't look at does provide you with a list of organizations. They're bigger ones that I know, but they're mostly situated in countries that are more economically developed. and are more focused and correctly in terms of trying to even address the issue of human trafficking, whereas there are countries that don't even try to address it. And oftentimes not only not address it, but the government is complicit in the profits that are made from human trafficking. So what can you do? Well, I think what was done in the developing countries, and even when I think of what was done in Ireland when I was a young sister, in setting up an organization like Ruama. So you have to come together with other like-minded people who see this as a problem and say, yes, we're going to address this. There is no other shortcut. And where the government is disorganized and not functioning, you and I know we step in, Vincent de Paul around the world steps in to provide services. So maybe this is something in your country that you want to look at with the Vincentian family to see what can you do to provide shelter. And it's the whole bringing people and helping them to regain health and overcome the traumatic experiences they have demands a lot of professional help, a lot of resources, etc. And it takes years to build it up. Trauma-informed therapies. But what we do see where it has and where these services are available, what we do see is women and men as survivors coming forward, and they're the best advocates. So I have no shortcut answer for you except to say, open your eyes. If there's a need there, start talking about how can we address this need. And governments that are wanting to do something are always talking about helping NGOs to address this need. So look to the State Department. They often are very helpful with NGOs. They're very pro what the NGOs do, the US State Department. And they do have some fundings. They do listen to what you have to say. So maybe inputting into their annual report is another way to do it. Advocacy is hugely important. Ministry and advocacy go together. Thank you.
I think in terms of advocacy, Juan Carlos Guerra has a question. Adelante, Juan. You're muted, Juan Carlos. Juan Carlos, you're muted. You can ask your question. Yeah, go.
Buenos días.
Buenos días.
Buen día. Escuchando la conferencia, la pregunta que yo planteé era, ¿qué pasos se están realizando a corto, mediano y largo plazo sobre este tema de la trata de personas? Basado en una experiencia aquí en Panamá sobre el fenómeno de la migración que está ocurriendo en Panamá. Entonces, creo que el fenómeno migratorio es un medio para precisamente que muchas personas sufran de trata, ser explotadas o ser abusadas para conseguir el sueño que buscan ellos. Entonces, mi pregunta está basada en qué pasos como familia vicentina hemos realizado a corto, mediano y largo plazo sobre la conciencia de esta realidad de la trata. Muchas gracias.
Did you get that question, Sister Winifred, in English?
Sí.
Thank you very much. Again, you're raising big issues. What is being done? And you're looking at the nexus between migration, immigration, and countries of origin, transit, and destination. These are the three terms that are used in human trafficking. Where are people coming from? What countries do they transit through? And where do they arrive? And oftentimes they maybe transit by being smuggled and then are trafficked someplace else. So what I find is that the United Nations systems are slowly coming together to recognize that these are not separate problems, but that they're all interconnected. That's a hopeful sign I see, but it doesn't help the situation on the ground as you and I see it in our ministries. And the whole focus on migration and safe, orderly and regular migration, that is hugely important. There are compacts, and yet we know there are all kinds of loopholes. So I don't have any quick answers to any of these. I think the more you discuss at local level what's happening, and also to recognize trafficking doesn't have to be across borders. Trafficking can be within your country, from the rural to the urban, from people who are excluded. These are often the people then that are vulnerable to being trafficked, to being abused, whether in labor or in sexual exploitation. Prevention, protection, and prosecution are three terms that are used in the international law. We are supposed to prevent human trafficking, protect the victim, and prosecute the trafficker. And guess which of the three threes is never has little attention paid to it? The prosecution. Though the prosecutions are always weighed down. Now there is a move to do more at that level, but it's when I talk about the global level and there's a move to do more, I also know in my heart of hearts, and you know from your experience, this doesn't impact us in my little town or my little village or my city. So I'm aware of that. And this is where we need to be together. Jim and I need your support, your information, everything you know about what's happening on the ground to be able to inform more what's happening at the global level.
Thank you. Dee Mancy.
Oh, hello. Sister Winifred Doherty. I want to actually talk about a couple of points, really. I wasn't expecting the second one to come into my head today, but something you said really has sparked that. The first thing is that I have seen this myself when working in abroad, advertisements for local girls, not actually promising they will be going into sex work, but promising they will have nanny roles and things like this. They'd be on gate posts. I've seen fly posters and things like that. And they know, the families know that it more than likely is going to be exploitative. And they do know that sometimes a lot of the time they go into sex work. So you're probably highly aware of that. But a phenomenon that happens in the developed world is something which sparked when you actually said that semantics, words are very important. And I agree. You said you disagree with the term sex worker. Now, from the feminist point of view, of course, it is exploitation if a woman is coerced. But sadly, there is a phenomenon here where, for instance, young girls will understand that men would be actually quite willing to partake in their services, and they may be students and will be doing it for cash. So when you have that sort of phenomenon in modern society, there is actually, we're almost inured to the fact that women might be exploited. There might be actually a segment of our society that thinks, well, they want to do it, or they're keen, and they're not really looking out actively to support those who are involved or being trafficked. So as you say, we have moved on from looking for the signs of, but it is really very, very difficult to actually get that high on the agenda of certain sectors of society if there is that viewpoint.
Agree. Jim, I don't know whether you want to take the other three questions.
I was thinking,
yeah, please. I will come back to you, Dee, yes, and answer your question. Thank you.
Yeah, let's do that. So I have 3 questions coming up here. If you could all state your questions very briefly. First of all, Padre Gregorio Gay.
Your mic?
He's unmuting, yeah. Oh, you're muted again, Greg.
Yeah. A simple question and regarding immigration and trafficking. It's a great phenomena here in Panama, as Juan Carlos made clear. And the problem is many good Christians, Vincentians who want to serve the needs of the migrants are accused by the government of contributing to trafficking human beings. When you help a migrant, you are accused of contributing to the trafficking of migrants. And so, I mean, trafficking persons. So many people resist and not sure what they should do. They don't want to go against the law. And the question is, it's put on the United Nations. The United Nations, according to the government here, has to make sure they fix this situation. Okay, thank you.
And Franca.
Thank you very much, Sister Dorothy. Once again, I'm seeing you on the screen, and I love seeing you because occasionally you come up on LinkedIn. I was quite interested in the aspect of you saying that we should not look for the signs, but look for the story. And my question is, sometimes when we come in contact with the trafficked persons, they are so wounded physically and weak in their memory that even to begin a conversation is so difficult. So what is the model that you could suggest for entering or opening a way into some kind of meaningful conversation with them without being intrusive or pervasive? Thank you, sister.
Thank you. And I think the last question will have to be from Javier.
Thank you, Jim. I'm not really sure if this is very close related with trafficking, but it's something that worries me. It is my understanding that child labor also has a lot to do with modern slavery. I think there's a certain feeling that in many occasions, people look the other way with respect of well-known multinationals that hire children in devastating conditions to do work or produce goods that are then sold in more developed countries. For example, it comes to my mind the child labor in some parts of the world to get minerals we need for technological products. What initiatives are being taken to sanction these transnationals, and how can we raise awareness in our society so that we do not buy their products? What can we do at the grassroots level? Thanks.
If you're very briefly, Marie-Françoise, and that'll be the last question.
Je vous remercie beaucoup, Père. Moi, je remercie d'abord chacun des intervenants pour ces questions, pour l'excellent exposé que nous avons eu. Et j'aimerais plutôt vous poser une question. Ne pensez-vous pas que, en tant que membre de la famille vincentienne, et nous sommes nombreux sur le terrain, nous ne pourrions pas intervenir au moins à 2 niveaux. Au niveau de la formation et de l'information auprès des familles, auprès des femmes que nous suivons, des jeunes, des enfants dans les écoles, etc. Ensuite, avec la mise en commun de nos connaissances, de nos compétences sur le terrain et toutes les suggestions que nous pouvons faire et prendre avec nos partenaires, notamment avec ceux ceux avec lesquels nous travaillons auprès des Nations Unies. Et je pense en particulier sur Genève, auprès des Nations Unies à Genève, à l'ordre de Malte, qui organise depuis des années des webinaires très importants sur toutes ces questions de traite humaine, qui essaye de progresser beaucoup, notamment pour faire avancer les mécanismes juridiques internationaux et naturellement les mécanismes juridiques dans chaque pays national. Voilà, c'était des questions plutôt que des réponses, mais je vous remercie.
So we'll let Sister Winifred do her best to answer that grouping of questions. If there are any further questions, please feel free to put them into the chat and we will respond by email. We'll try to answer all those questions. Sister Winifred.
Thank you very much, Jim. I think we could be here for the day, given the breadth and of the questions answered, but they show in their own way your own knowledge of what's happening and your desire to engage and do something. So kudos for such great questions. I don't know where to begin. I'm going to begin with the minerals and that whole issue of child labor. There are many branches of the UN, including the Sustainable Development Goals, 8.7, Goal 8.7, Target 7, which is to say end child labor. When we were writing that in 2015, we said end child labor by 2025.
I know.
We didn't even put it to 2030. We said it can be done in a shorter time. And the reality is it's not done and the numbers are increasing. Okay. So there's plenty of organizations. I myself have been on the floor of Tesla giving statements at the shareholders meeting in 2 consecutive years to address this issue. The last time I was heckled because the shareholders don't want to hear this because it interferes with their profit. Mm-hmm. So all I can say is I'll be back next year because we need that kind of tenacity to keep it up. With regard to Maria's question, I think that's a huge question, information, training, and we certainly need to share with all of the people we work and collaborate with the knowledge that we have, set up, inform people of their rights, people at the grassroots level to be interested. I think this is where we need the education and the empowerment from the very grassroots, that people are educated, told. And so that then would lead me to what Greg brought up in terms of the immigration and trafficking, and that if somebody attempts to help a person, then you're accused of trafficking. That's all politically motivated. That's politically motivated because just as I said, I was heckled on the floor of Tesla. I am also saying at the political level, while I might say the US State Department with regard to human trafficking is very supportive of NGOs, when we look at the whole issue of migration within the United States, it's a broken system. It's horrendous. And what's happening is unconscionable in this day and age. It's unconscionable, and we need more and more to speak out about it. Sometimes what I hear from NGOs is the danger of speaking out, both to themselves and to their communities and to the local people. And so we're all caught in different nets that prevent us from acting. We're trying to balance the good of of the people, my Vincentian community, the local community I'm ministering to. And even one time when we were working with the children in the DRC, and I had done a session at the UN, and even had representatives from the Democratic Republic of Congo present. Later, the police went to that center, and there was, you know, what are you teaching, etc. And the children, they were putting the children out of the school. And one boy, almost the last one walking out, said, "But education is our right."
Mm.
And the police left and the other children back in.
Mm.
So, you know, we education. And then that takes me back to the whole issue. Am I there? The whole, hello?
Yes.
Yes, sorry, I clicked something and I couldn't see myself anymore. Then that takes us back to the whole issue that was brought up at the beginning with regard to feminists and this whole issue of sex work versus Good Shepherd Sisters, and this is exploitation. And I want to link this also with another question that was asked about people being so vulnerable. How and when do you begin to talk to them? Good Shepherd experience in this is we move in dark areas, in brothels. I myself worked on the streets of Addis Ababa, the night work. I was going to show you something. It's you have the link on the video, on the PowerPoint with regard to our work in Thailand. And I, as a very young sister in Asia, I was doing a course in the Philippines. This is where I got some of my huge insights into this issue. In Thailand, where at night we went out in twos and threes, and we went to the brothels. We were accepted there, not because we were proselytizing, not because we come to take women out of there, not because we were anything except buying a drink. But in buying the drink, the women used to come, talk to us, share their story, you know, what was happening, etc., etc. And, you know, months later, years later, they were saying, "Oh, can you help us?" You know, and we opened up a day center and they used to come there during the day. When I was there, they came even with the men. They brought the men that were with them the night before. And my experience, young English guys, and I said to the sister, I said, I could kill them. That's how angry I was. And she said to me, "It's your job to speak to them. And so you needn't worry about the women. Your job is to speak to them." And I learned something about, they were like big children. They had no idea either. They had come to Thailand, holidays, you know, with all of the exploitation, I call it exploitation, was being offered. And so, you know, they wanted to see where the girls were coming during the day. So like our services have developed in Thailand, they still continue the street work. They have all of the centers, there's therapies, there's trauma-informed, all kinds of things. So I'm saying, to begin, you have to be immersed in the life, in the situation, in the environment with the women, not to challenge them, not to condemn them, not to proselytize, not to do anything, to be what we say, Jesus the Good Shepherd, you know, and never condemned anyone and was there for the lost one. So that's our approach. And so when it comes to the whole issue, and I have confronted it many times, and I have been expelled from some feminist groups because of holding that position, that all trafficking, all engagement in terms of buying sex is in fact exploitation. And it's power over. The person with money has power over the person who doesn't. So it's an abuse of power. It has nothing to do with the dignity of two people. It has nothing to do with entering into a relationship. It's power over. One has the money, the other hasn't. And very often it's the men have the money. And so it's patriarchy informs this, and misogyny. These two go together. And so, yes, girls, young girls, college students, you know, the sugar daddies are all around. You know, we can, you know, you can have a great lifestyle, you can be this, you can be that, you know, but at what cost to the individual, the integrity of the individual, the integrity of a person, the dignity of the person. So that's my perspective on it. And I offer no apologies to anybody who thinks differently. But in my work, I will sit with any woman in any condition, and I will not use what I am saying now, because what I'm saying now, I have learned from the advocacy perspective. I have to be very clear. This is my advocacy moment. If I am back tomorrow morning in ministry, I will not be preaching like that. You know, and I'll put it down to preaching, advocating like that, will I say, with the group. I will be trying to offer them comfort, offer them an ear, offer them whatever is necessary to begin that soul healing, that deep healing. And it's a lifetime. It's a lifetime. So that's all I can say. You know, we bring the compassion at one end, and we bring the moment of advocacy. And I find both in Jesus's life. He confronted the authorities when they needed to be confronted. He lost his life over it. And we're alarmed today at the number of human rights defenders that have lost their lives. Either for the climate, I know time is up, either for the climate or for persons. And so I will end there. So thank you very much, Jim, and apologies for going on. I can do the day, no problem.
Winifred, what a great way to end the session. Thank you so much. And back to you, Natalie.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Sister Winifred. I think your words are go straight to our Vincentian hearts as well. Speak very straight to our hearts. We would be here, like you said, all day. I think we're all very enthusiastic about the discussion and learning more about it. And we thank you so much for sharing your experience, your rich experience with us, and helping us, like Dad has said in the chat box, a lot left to reflect and to put into action in each one of our regions. And also the fact that there's no small thing. I mean, from anything from, you know, like you said, being, you know, wearing your orange scarf for during the days of elimination of the 16 days for the elimination of violence against women, to wearing black, like our Scottish friend is telling us they do in Scotland. We need to engage from small things, but also in bigger actions as well. So it's a lot to still to explore and to learn. And I think your presentation gave us all these good ideas and good links to look up for more information. Sister Winifred also has kindly shared a very complete paper with us that develops this issue further. And we will be sharing it with all of you, as well as Sister Winifred's PowerPoint.
Okay.
So if you have joined the webinar with an open participation link, not registering, please do send us your email address so that we can send you that material. Send it to FHA. FHA.info@famvin.org. So before closing the webinar, please let me thank on this Thanksgiving Day again, all of those who made this meeting possible, the participants joining from all over the world, the interpreters in Paris, Brussels, Portugal, and who helped us today to understand one another, the members of the FHA team also, and a special thank you to Sister Winifred and to Jim, who have joined us during this important holiday in the United States. So to conclude, just a few announcements. We will be asking you after the webinar to give us feedback on your experience and how it was for you. It will be very helpful if you can take just a couple of minutes to give us that feedback. Thank you. And also in December, you will be receiving the FHA newsletter featuring the latest milestones regarding our work with people experiencing homelessness. But our year is not over yet. So in a few days, you will be receiving also the 13 Houses bulletin. And you will see in it a freshly made video to celebrate the 4th year of the campaign. We are very close to getting to that 10,000 people target. So you'll be glad to know that the deadline for the call for proposals for new projects has been extended to the end of February. And we would like to ask you to please share as much as possible this information with all your Vincentian contacts. So I wish you the rest of your day will be a joyful one. Happy Thanksgiving. And thank you, everyone. We hope you will join on future webinars next year. And happy Advent and Christmas season to everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Thank you.